You think you know the story of Rapunzel, the princess with hair like spun gold, locked away in a lonely tower. You imagine her singing to the birds, brushing her impossibly long braids, and waiting for the day a prince would climb to her rescue. It seems innocent, almost charming, a perfect fairy tale crafted for children's bedtime. But what if I told you that Rapunzel's tale was far older than the Brothers Grimm, older even than medieval Europe itself? Hidden beneath its gentle melodies lies a darker, more ancient truth, a story whispered through ruins, carved into forgotten tablets, and carried across distant civilizations for more than 2,000 years. This is not merely a children's fable. It is a mythic code, an echo of archaic rites of imprisonment and initiation, of sacred hair as a conduit of divine power, and of women confined between the worlds of life and death. Once upon a time, there was a poor couple who longed for a child. They lived near the walled garden of a sorceress, a garden filled with herbs of extraordinary power. The wife, heavy with pregnancy, gazed upon the sorceress's lush rampion leaves and craved them with desperation. Her husband, unable to deny her, climbed the wall and stole a handful. The sorceress caught him and demanded a price. In exchange for mercy, he promised her their unborn child. And so, when the baby girl was born, the sorceress claimed her and named her Rapunzel. The child grew into a girl of breathtaking beauty, with hair long, golden, and magical. Fearing the world's corruption, the sorceress locked her high in a secluded tower with no doors and only one window. To enter, the sorceress would call Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, and climb the cascading braid like a rope. One day, a prince heard Rapunzel singing from her tower. Enchanted, he watched as the sorceress ascended by her hair, and later mimicked the call to reach the maiden. In time, the two fell in love. Rapunzel let slip her secret, and the sorceress, furious, cast her out into the wilderness while blinding the prince with thorns. Yet love endured. After wandering apart, they found each other once more. Rapunzel's tears healed his blindness, and they lived happily ever after, far from the tower's shadows. This is the story as most remember it, a simple fairy tale of danger and deliverance, imprisonment and freedom, sorrow and healing. But what if every detail, the forbidden herb, the tower, the hair, even the blinding, were fragments of something much older, preserved from times when myths and rituals guided humanity's understanding of fate? But the tale of Rapunzel was not always told in the way we hear it today. Its earliest known form appeared in Italy during the 17th century, recorded by Giambattista Bosel in his collection Pentamerone under the name Petronella. In this version, the girl's mother craved parsley and the child was taken by an ogress rather than a sorceress. The imprisonment in a tower remained, but the ending was far harsher, filled with ogres, blood, and flight through a dangerous wilderness. Later, in the late 17th century, the French writer Charles-Louis de Caumont de la Force reworked the tale into Persnet. She softened the edges, emphasizing love, fate, and the possibility of redemption. Her narrative began to resemble the more recognizable fairy tale that parents would eventually tell their children. It was, however, the Brothers Grimm in the early 19th century who gave the tale its most famous form. They removed much of the sensuality, moral ambiguity, and darker tones that had marked earlier versions. Instead, they transformed Rapunzel into a symbol of innocence, chastity, and the dangers of youthful desire. In their text, even the pregnancy of Rapunzel, a feature in earlier renditions, was erased, replaced by subtle suggestions of forbidden love. Across time, each retelling of Rapunzel was reshaped to suit the morality, fears, and desires of its audience. In the Italian and French forms, the story reflected anxieties about female autonomy, parental bargains, and the monstrous feminine. In the Grimm's Germany, it became a moral fable warning against disobedience and premarital love. Thus, the tale has never been static. Like the braids of Rapunzel herself, the story has been twisted, pulled, and rewoven by the hands of each generation, reflecting their values and their shadows. On closer inspection, many of the story's details bear striking resemblance to myths that long predate Europe's fairy tale traditions. Consider the motif of the tower. Across cultures, towers and high places symbolize both imprisonment and divine contact. In Mesopotamian myth, the ziggurat stood as a stairway between heaven and earth, a sacred link much like Rapunzel's hair. In Greek myth, Dano was locked in a bronze chamber by her father, only to be visited by Zeus in a golden shower. The theme of the maiden confined in a high place, isolated from the world, echoes across time. Then there is the hair. In many ancient traditions, hair represented vitality and sacred strength. The biblical figure of Samson drew his power from his uncut locks, while in Norse mythology, the goddess Sif's golden hair was tied to fertility and abundance. Rapunzel's flowing braid may not be merely a rope, but a thread of life itself, binding the human to the divine. The blinding of the prince also resonates with older patterns. In myth, blindness often marks the crossing into deeper spiritual insight. Oedipus is blinded, yet gains wisdom. The Norse god Hr is blind, yet plays a role in the cycle of fate. When Rapunzel's tears restored the prince's sight, it is not just healing, it is symbolic resurrection. the return of vision through love and sacrifice. Could it be that Rapunzel is not only a princess in a tower, but an echo of ancient archetypes? She may stand as the maiden goddess, the keeper of sacred life force, imprisoned yet radiant. The tower becomes not merely a prison but a temple, a place of initiation. Her hair is the umbilical cord to the divine, and her story becomes a ritual of loss, blindness, and rebirth. Through these symbolic connections, Rapunzel's tale reveals itself not as a quaint children's bedtime story, but as a living relic of humanity's oldest myths. In the 19th century, folklorists began to notice something strange. Variants of Rapunzel's tale appeared far beyond Germany, Italy, or France. Researchers collected parallel stories in Persia, Turkey, India, and even as far as East Asia. In each case, the same elements repeated: a young maiden promised or stolen at birth, confinement in an inaccessible tower or chamber, a magical means of escape, and a transformative reunion with a suitor. In 1889, scholars of comparative mythology proposed that the tale must have roots in a much older stratum of human storytelling, likely predating the Middle Ages by more than 1,000 years. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia mention rituals of young women secluded in towers during puberty, a practice designed to preserve purity and to connect them with the gods. Archaeologists also uncovered frescoes in Crete depicting long-haired priestesses standing atop high structures, their braids cascading like sacred threads to the ground. Even in Central Asia, nomadic myths tell of maidens with magical hair who live apart from the world, visited only by heroes who must prove their courage. These widespread patterns suggest that the story of Rapunzel is not the invention of one culture, but rather a shared human inheritance, preserved across continents. Experts now believe the tale originated from ancient Indo-European traditions, perhaps more than 3,000 years ago. At its heart, the story encodes rites of passage, the seclusion of the maiden, the dangerous trial of the suitor, the wound of blindness, and the eventual healing union. What we call Rapunzel may once have been a sacred drama enacted in temples or households, a symbolic journey marking the transition from girlhood to womanhood, from isolation to integration into the community. Through archaeology and folklore studies, the Tower of Rapunzel begins to resemble not just a fictional prison, but a monument built of human ritual, myth, and memory. What seems like a simple story of hair and love hides layers of symbolic meaning. The magical hair is the most obvious key. In many ancient belief systems, hair is the seat of the soul or life force. By lowering her hair, Rapunzel performs a sacred act. She allows another being to climb the bridge of her vitality. Her braid is no mere rope, it is a living cord, like the umbilical thread between mother and child, connecting mortal and divine. The tower itself stands as a threshold. It is both prison and sanctuary, womb and tomb. Isolated from the world, Rapunzel undergoes a symbolic death, cut off from society. Only through the descent of another, first the sorceress, then the prince, can the cycle of rebirth begin. In this sense, the tower resembles ancient initiation chambers, where novices faced solitude, fasting, and confinement before emerging transformed. The blinding of the prince is not cruelty alone. In myth, blindness often marks the loss of physical sight to gain spiritual vision. When thorns pierce his eyes, the prince symbolically descends into darkness, the underworld of the soul. His wandering mirrors the hero's journey through despair, awaiting illumination. Rapunzel's tears then act as baptismal waters, restoring him not only to sight but to spiritual wholeness. Even the sorceress holds symbolic weight. She may represent the archetype of the crone or goddess of fate, the one who severs, imprisons, and tests. In older cultures, such a figure guarded the threshold of womanhood, ensuring the maiden's power would not be squandered until the proper moment of union. Viewed through this lens, Rapunzel is not a helpless captive but a sacred figure. Her story is an allegory of initiation, the passage through isolation, suffering, blindness, and eventual renewal. The fairy tale becomes a mirror of ancient rites, encoded so deeply into our culture that even children's stories still carry its echoes. The story of Rapunzel, which most people think of as a charming bedtime tale, is far more than a children's fantasy. Behind the golden hair and lonely tower lies a web of myth, ritual, and history stretching back thousands of years. It is the convergence of archaeology, folklore, and spirituality. The tower is not just a prison but an ancient temple of initiation. The hair is not just long and beautiful but a sacred cord of vitality and divine connection. The prince's blindness and healing are not just plot twists but echoes of the soul's journey through death and rebirth. Even the sorceress, feared as a villain, carries the mantle of the old goddess of thresholds, the guardian of transformation. Rapunzel is not a passive maiden waiting for rescue. She is a figure of mystery, embodying the tension between confinement and liberation, between sacred power and worldly love. Her tale reminds us that fairy stories are not shallow diversions but vessels of ancient truths, carrying humanity's oldest rituals across time. So the next time you hear the simple phrase, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," remember that it is more than a line from a children's story. It is a fragment of humanity's forgotten past, a ritual cry echoing through towers, temples, and myths for millennia. And if that sends a shiver down your spine, hold on to it, for every fairy tale hides a deeper reality, and the next story may reveal something even more unsettling.